The stars weren't supposed to look like that, stretched and bleeding into each other like watercolors left in the rain. Jake Morrow had seen plenty of weird things during his 5 years hauling cargo across the outer colonies, but this kaleidoscope nightmare currently filling his viewport was definitely making the top 10 list. Possibly top 5, depending on whether he survived the next 60 seconds. "Come on, you beautiful disaster," he muttered, wrestling with controls that had decided now was the perfect time to stop responding. The console sparked, which was never a good sign, and the proximity alarm was screaming so loud he could barely hear himself think. "Just hold together for." The ship lurched violently sideways, and Jake's head cracked against the headrest hard enough to see stars. Real ones this time, not the smeared cosmic finger painting outside. His freight vessel, the Persephone, named after his ex-girlfriend because both were temperamental and constantly breaking down, groaned like a wounded animal as something fundamental gave way in the engine compartment. The spatial anomaly, which had appeared out of absolutely nowhere and definitely wasn't on any of his navigation charts, yanked the ship forward with the enthusiasm of a kid grabbing candy. Jake had exactly enough time to think several very creative curse words before the universe turned inside out. His stomach tried to exit through his spine, and everything went the color of confusion. Then he was falling. Actually falling, through atmosphere, with fire licking the hull and alarms providing a truly spectacular symphony of impending doom. The automated systems, bless their digital hearts, were trying their best to compensate, firing thrusters in a pattern that probably looked hilarious from the ground. Jake managed to grab the manual controls, which responded with all the grace of a drunk hippo, and aimed for what looked like a forest. Trees were soft, right? Softer than rocks, anyway. The Persephone plowed through the canopy in a shower of branches and leaves that glowed. Glowed. Before slamming into the ground with enough force to rattle Jake's teeth and make every joint in his body lodge a formal complaint. The impact harness dug into his shoulders, smoke filled the cabin, and something was making a rhythmic clanking sound that suggested the ship's remaining lifespan could now be measured in minutes. Jake hit the emergency release, and the harness retracted with a pneumatic hiss. He stumbled toward the exit hatch, coughing, grabbing his emergency pack from its wall mount. The hatch refused to open at first, because of course it did, then finally yielded to a solid kick and a string of profanity that would have made a space pirate blush. Fresh air hit him like a gift from the universe, and he tumbled out onto soil that felt wrong. Not bad wrong, just different, springier maybe. He lay there for a moment taking inventory. Arms worked. Legs worked. Head hurt like someone had used it for drum practice, but that was probably normal after crash landing on an uncharted planet through a spatial anomaly that absolutely shouldn't have existed. "Well," he said to nobody in particular, his voice hoarse, "at least the insurance can't say I didn't try." He pushed himself up to his knees, then his feet, and finally looked around at where the universe had decided to dump him. His jaw dropped. The forest was alive with light. Not sunlight, though there was a sun hanging in the sky, looking slightly more orange than Sol, but bioluminescence that pulsed through the vegetation like a slow heartbeat. Trees with bark that shimmered silver and violet reached toward a sky that was the wrong shade of blue, more like someone had mixed blue and purple and couldn't decide which looked better. Flowers the size of his head grew in clusters, opening and closing in a rhythm that suggested they might actually be breathing. Floating motes of light drifted through the air like lazy fireflies, and in the distance he could see structures, buildings. That seemed to be made of crystal or glass, catching the light and throwing it in 1,000 directions. "Okay," Jake said slowly, turning in a circle. "Okay, this is fine. This is totally fine. I've just crashed on a planet that looks like a rave threw up in a botanical garden. No problem. I'll just call for help and..." His comm unit was dead, naturally. The ship's main systems were offline, obviously. And judging by the smoke still pouring from the Persephone's engine compartment, She wasn't going anywhere without a miracle and about 6 months in a proper repair dock. A sound made him freeze. Footsteps, light and quick, coming through the underbrush. His hand went instinctively to his hip, where his plasma pistol should have been, then remembered he'd stored it in the cargo hold because he was just doing a routine supply run and what could possibly go wrong. She stepped into view, and Jake's brain briefly forgot how to form words. She looked human. Mostly. Same basic body plan, same facial structure, same way of moving that suggested bipedal evolution and probably similar gravity to Earth. But her skin had a copper tone that seemed to shift subtly in the strange light, and her hair, long and flowing, colored somewhere between amber and gold, moved as though underwater. She wore clothing made of fabric that shimmered like oil on water, fitted but practical, and her eyes were larger than human normal, colored a vivid emerald that seemed to catch and hold light. And her ears. They were long, elegantly tapered, rising to delicate points that extended several inches beyond where human ears should end, giving her an otherworldly grace that was simultaneously alien and captivating. She tilted her head, studying him with open curiosity, those remarkable eyes scanning him from head to toe. Jake realized he probably looked like absolute garbage, clothes torn, face smudged with soot, hair standing at angles that defied physics. His mouth engaged before his brain could stop it. "Are alien girls always this sexy?" he said. The words hung in the air for a moment. Jake's brain caught up with his mouth and immediately filed for divorce. He opened his mouth to apologize, to explain that he just crashed, hit his head, and clearly wasn't thinking straight when she laughed. It was a sound like wind chimes made of crystal, melodic and bright, and it transformed her face from merely beautiful to absolutely radiant. She said something in a language that sounded like music mixed with mathematics, and Jake spread his hands helplessly. "I don't suppose you speak." She spoke again, and this time the words resolved into something he could understand, though he had no idea how. "Understand me now. The translation field should be adapting to your neural patterns." "Translation field," Jake repeated weakly. "Right, of course. That's totally a normal thing that definitely makes sense." Her laugh came again, and Jake heard other sounds now. More footsteps, more voices, all female, all approaching with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for zoo animals or particularly interesting rocks. Within moments, he was surrounded by a dozen women who looked similar to the first. Same copper skin tones, though varying in shade, same elongated ears, same otherworldly beauty, all staring at him with expressions ranging from fascination to amusement. One of them, with hair the color of midnight and ears decorated with intricate silver jewelry, leaned close and said something that made the others giggle. The first woman, the one who'd found him, smiled and turned back to Jake. "Welcome to Ethera, strange traveler," she said, her emerald eyes dancing with amusement. That was quite an entrance and quite an introduction. Her smile widened. "I am Lyria. Who exactly are you?" Jake Morrow, cargo pilot and apparently the galaxy's worst first contact ambassador, looked at the circle of beautiful alien women surrounding him, at his smoking ship behind him, at the impossible glowing forest and the violet sky above, and did the only thing that made sense. He laughed. "I'm Jake," he said, "and I think I'm going to need a really good mechanic." The city defied everything Jake thought he knew about architecture. Buildings grew from the ground like organic sculptures, their walls rippling with patterns that shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. Walkways of what appeared to be living vines connected structures at various heights, and people, always women, he noted with growing confusion, moved along them with casual grace. Some of the pathways even floated, suspended by nothing visible, just hanging in the air like someone had forgotten to tell them about gravity. "So let me get this straight," Jake said, as Lyria guided him along one of these impossible bridges. He was trying very hard not to look down at the 50-foot drop beneath his feet. Your entire civilization just decided that physics are more like friendly suggestions. Lyria's laugh was becoming familiar, musical and light. Physics work perfectly well here. You're simply not accustomed to what's possible when matter and energy are properly understood. She gestured to a nearby building where the walls pulsed with soft blue light. That structure houses our agricultural systems. The bioluminescent matrix provides both light and nutrients to the plants growing inside. Right, sure, glowing walls that feed vegetables. Why didn't Earth think of that? Jake stumbled slightly as the walkway beneath him swayed. Several passing women glanced his way, their long ears twitching with what he was starting to recognize as curiosity. One of them said something that made her companions giggle, and Jake felt his face heat. "Are they talking about me?" "You're a novelty," Lyria said diplomatically. "We don't receive many visitors. Actually, we don't receive any visitors. You're the first outsider to reach Ethera in recorded history." "Fantastic. I'm boldly going where no idiot has gone before." Jake paused as they entered a plaza where fountains of liquid light arced through the air, somehow maintaining coherent streams despite having no visible containment. "Okay, I have to ask, where are all the guys?" Lyria's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Our males exist in separate enclaves. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Like we had a really bad breakup. Complicated, or ancient societal structure, based on reasons nobody remembers. Complicated." "The second one, mostly." She led him toward a building that seemed larger than the others, its surface covered in geometric patterns that moved like water. "But this isn't the time. You need medical evaluation, and I need to understand how your vessel brought you here." The interior of the building was even more disorienting than the outside. The floor felt solid but transparent, revealing levels below where people moved about their business. The walls displayed images that might have been art or data or both, shifting and rearranging themselves constantly. Equipment that Jake couldn't begin to identify hummed quietly in alcoves, attended by women who wore variations of the shimmering garments Lyria favored. "This is our primary research facility," Lyria explained, guiding him to a chamber where a platform rose from the floor at their approach. "Please sit. The scanners are non-invasive." Jake sat, eyeing the devices that emerged from the ceiling with deep suspicion. They looked like floating prisms, rotating slowly as they descended. "You know where I come from. We usually buy a person dinner before we start probing them." "We're not probing anything. We're measuring your biometric signature, ensuring the crash didn't cause internal damage, and analyzing your cellular structure to understand why you look so remarkably similar to our species." One of the prisms emitted a soft hum, and Lyria's eyes widened slightly as she studied a display only she could see. "Fascinating. Your DNA structure is almost identical to ours. The probability of parallel evolution producing such similarity is astronomically small. Maybe we're related, long-lost cosmic cousins." Jake tried to keep still as the prisms circled him. They were making him itchy, though he couldn't feel anything actually touching him. "Although that would make my comment when we met really awkward at family reunions." Lyria smiled despite herself. "Your humor is unusual. Our males tend to be more reserved, contemplative." "Yeah, well, contemplation doesn't fix crashed spaceships or explain why I fell through a hole in reality." He watched as more data scrolled across the displays. "Speaking of which, any chance you've got parts for a Helix 7 quantum drive lying around? I'm going to need a new flux regulator at minimum, possibly an entire engine core if I'm being realistic, which I'm trying very hard not to be. I don't know what any of those things are, but our engineers are examining your vessel now." She made a gesture and the prisms retracted upward. "You're physically intact. Minor concussion, some bruising, but nothing our medical systems can't address." She reached for something on a nearby surface, a small device that looked like a smooth stone that glowed from within. "This will accelerate your healing." Jake took it cautiously. It was warm, pulsing gently against his palm like a heartbeat. Do I eat it or just hold it or what? Just hold it. The resonance will align with your cellular frequency. She paused, studying him with those remarkable green eyes. You keep making jokes, but I can tell you're frightened, trying to mask it. Hey, I'm not frightened. I'm terrified. There's a difference. Jake felt warmth spreading from the device through his hand, up his arm, and the headache that had been hammering behind his eyes since the crash began to fade. Also impressed, also confused, also wondering if I'm actually in a coma right now, and this is all a really elaborate dream. You're not dreaming. Lyria moved to a window that showed the city sprawling below them, the twin moons already visible in the darkening violet sky. Though I understand why you might wish you were, your arrival has caused quite a disruption. Good disruption, or please leave immediately disruption. Curious disruption. She turned back to him, her expression serious now. There's something you should know. Your arrival wasn't entirely coincidental. Jake's stomach tightened. I really don't like the sound of that. Our astronomers have been tracking unusual stellar activity for the past decade. Our sun is destabilizing, Jake. Slowly, but inevitably. We have perhaps 2 generations before Ethera becomes uninhabitable. She crossed to where the displays showed swirling patterns of data. 3 nights ago, our sensors detected a massive energy surge from the sector where you appeared. We've been monitoring that region because our ancient texts mention it as a point of connection, a bridge between distant stars. Wait, ancient texts? Jake stood, the glowing stone still in his hand. You're saying someone predicted I'd crash here? Not you specifically, but the texts speak of a visitor from beyond who would arrive during the time of the dying star. Someone who would either help us find salvation or herald our end. Lyria's ears tilted back slightly, a gesture he was learning meant uncertainty or worry. The Council of Elders wants to meet you. They believe your quantum drive, as you call it, might be connected to the ancient technology our ancestors left behind. Okay, hold on. Time out. Jake made a T-shape with his hands, a gesture that clearly meant nothing here but made him feel better. I'm just a cargo pilot. I haul crates of synthetic protein and medical supplies between colonies. I don't know anything about saving civilizations or ancient technology or... The building shook. Not violently, but enough to make the displays flicker and send several researchers scrambling for balance. Jake grabbed the platform edge, his heart hammering, but Lyria barely reacted beyond a resigned sigh. Seismic adjustments, she said calmly. They've become more frequent as the stellar instability increases. Don't worry, the structures are designed to flex. Oh sure, don't worry. The planet's shaking because the sun is dying, and there's some prophecy about me maybe helping or maybe dooming everyone. Why would I worry? Jake ran his free hand through his hair, which probably looked even worse now than it had after the crash. This is insane. Yesterday, my biggest problem was whether I could afford to replace the Persephone's coolant system. Now, I'm apparently part of some cosmic destiny situation. Destiny is a strong word, Lyria said, but her expression suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as him. Perhaps you simply arrived at a moment when we desperately need new perspectives, new possibilities, new scapegoats when things go wrong. That too, potentially. She smiled, trying to lighten the mood. But look at the positive side. You're extremely popular already. I've received 17 invitations for you to attend various social functions, and that was just while we were conducting scans. Popular with alien women who think I'm either their savior or their doom. Great. That's exactly the kind of attention I need. Jake looked at the glowing stone in his hand, then back at Lyria. What happens if I can't help? What if my ship's engine is just an engine, and the wormhole was just random, and I'm just some guy who had incredibly bad luck? Lyria stepped closer, and he could see the worry beneath her composed exterior. Then, we continue searching for answers until time runs out. But Jake, the probability of you arriving here by pure chance at this exact moment in our history, with technology that might connect to our ancestors' work, is infinitesimally small. Yeah, well, I've built a career on beating long odds. He managed a weak smile, usually by accident. Then perhaps, she said softly, you're exactly the kind of accident we need. Outside the window, the twin moons rose higher, casting their light across a city that had stood for millennia but might not survive another century. And Jake, standing in a building grown from living materials on an alien world he couldn't have found on any map, holding a healing stone that hummed in harmony with his cells, realized he'd crashed into something far bigger than he could have imagined. Which was, he reflected, becoming an uncomfortable pattern in his life. The Festival of Three Moons apparently meant everyone wore clothing that glowed in the dark and gravity became optional. Jake stood at the edge of the plaza, watching people float upward in spiraling patterns like leaves caught in an invisible wind, and wondered if he'd accidentally eaten something hallucinogenic in the past few hours. "It's perfectly safe," Lyria assured him, appearing at his elbow in a new outfit that shimmered with colors he was reasonably certain didn't exist in normal human vision. Her long ears were adorned with delicate chains of light that traced their elegant curves. "The anti-gravity field is precisely calibrated. You won't drift away." That's exactly what someone says right before you drift away. Jake tugged at his own borrowed garments, which fit well enough but kept changing color based on what he could only assume was his emotional state. Right now, they were cycling through nervous blues and uncertain greens. "Also, these clothes are narking on my feelings, and I don't appreciate it." A woman spun past them, laughing as she executed a perfect flip in midair. Her companion followed, and they clasped hands, creating a spiral that drew admiring sounds from the crowd below. Music filled the air, though Jake couldn't identify any instruments. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a melody that made his chest resonate in ways that were either profound or mildly concerning. "You're overthinking it," a new voice said. Jake turned to find another Aetheran woman regarding him with amusement. She was taller than Lyria, with hair cropped short in a style that made her pointed ears more prominent, and her copper skin had darker tones that reminded him of polished bronze. "The festival happens once every 10 cycles. You can either stand here looking terrified or experience something you'll never forget. I'm Jake, and I prefer my terror visible, thanks. Keeps people's expectations low." "Zephyra," she said, extending a hand in a gesture that must have been universal. Her grip was firm. "I heard about the visitor who crashed through the sky making inappropriate comments. Had to see for myself." "Great, my reputation precedes me. Is there a planetary broadcast system I should apologize on, or?" Zephyra grinned, her teeth very white against her dark lips. "I like this one, Lyria. He's got spine." She gestured upward where the three moons hung in perfect alignment, their combined light casting the city in shades of silver and blue. "Come on, stranger. I'll make sure you don't float into orbit." Before Jake could protest, Zephyra grabbed his hand and pulled him forward into the anti-gravity field. His stomach lurched as his feet left the ground, and for a terrifying moment he was convinced he was going to vomit in front of several hundred alien women who probably didn't need another reason to find him entertaining. Then the sensation smoothed out and he was floating. Actually floating, drifting upward with the gentle pressure of Zephyra's hand guiding him. The city spread out below, a tapestry of bioluminescent architecture and flowing light, and above the three moons hung like cosmic judges watching the celebration. "Okay," Jake admitted, his voice slightly higher than usual. "This is either amazing or I'm having a stroke." "Definitely amazing," Zephyra said, pulling him into a slow spin. Around them, other dancers wove complex patterns, their movements creating temporary sculptures in the air that dissolved and reformed. "The field reads your intention. Think about where you want to go, and it responds." Jake thought about going up, and immediately shot upward fast enough to make Zephyra laugh and chase after him. He thought about stopping and nearly gave himself whiplash. Several attempts later, he managed something approximating control. though his movement pattern looked more like a confused butterfly than the graceful arcs the Aetherans achieved. "You're terrible at this," Zephyra observed cheerfully, catching his arm before he collided with an older woman whose ears bore the weight of many years and even more jewelry. "I'm excellent at crashing spaceships and saying the wrong thing at the worst times. Dancing in anti-gravity fields wasn't covered in pilot training." Jake managed to orient himself right side up, though the concept of up and down was becoming increasingly negotiable. "Do you people do this often, or is this just for special occasions?" "Special occasions, though some of the younger ones sneak into the recreational fields during off hours." Zephyra guided him through a cluster of celebrants who were juggling spheres of liquid light that burst into fractals when caught. "Lyria tells me you're supposed to save our world. Lyria has high expectations. I'm supposed to not die embarrassingly, which is ambitious enough. I like low expectations, easier to exceed them." She pulled him into a descent, and they landed on one of the floating platforms that drifted through the festival space. Tables laden with food covered the surface, and the dishes themselves seemed alive with color and movement. "You should try the kava fruits. They change flavor based on your mood." Jake picked up something that looked like a purple apple but felt more like holding warm jelly. He took a cautious bite, and flavors exploded across his tongue, something like strawberry mixed with cinnamon, and a third thing he had no reference for but decided was probably what stardust tasted like if stardust was delicious. The fruit's color shifted from purple to gold in his hand. "What does gold mean?" he asked around another bite. Surprise mixed with pleasure. "You're an open book." Zephyra selected her own fruit, which turned a deep crimson. "Meanwhile, I'm apparently feeling aggressive satisfaction, which sounds about right." Lyria found them there, floating down with the easy grace of someone who'd been doing this her entire life. She held 2 glasses of something that sparkled with internal light. "I thought you might need this. It's our traditional festival beverage. Fair warning, it's mildly psychoactive." "Oh good, because I wasn't having enough trouble with reality already." Jake took the glass anyway. The liquid tasted like honey and lightning, and warmth spread through his chest immediately. "How mildly are we talking?" "You might see colors more vividly. Time might feel fluid, nothing dangerous." Lyria smiled at Zephyra. "I see you've claimed him for the mind maze." "Wait, what?" Jake looked between them. "Nobody said anything about a maze." "It's a game," Zephyra explained, her eyes lighting up with competitive fire. "Virtual reality, but more direct. Plugs into your neural pathways and creates a shared mental landscape. First person to navigate to the center wins. It's tradition during the festival. And you want me to play because you're different. Your mind works differently than ours. I'm curious how that manifests in the maze." She tilted her head, her short hair catching the moonlight. "Unless you're afraid you'll lose to an alien girl." Jake recognized the challenge for what it was and knew he was absolutely going to regret this. "Fine, but when this goes horribly wrong and I end up brain damaged, I'm blaming both of you." The mind maze interface looked like a crown made of light. Zephyra placed one on her head, and it settled there like it was made for her, which it probably was. Jake's interface required some adjustment, and Lyria had to recalibrate it twice to account for his different neural structure. "Remember," Lyria said, making final adjustments, "it's not physically real. Your mind creates the landscape based on subconscious associations. There's no actual danger." "Right, just my subconscious on display for everyone. What could go wrong?" Jake felt the crown activate, a gentle pressure behind his eyes, and then the world shifted. He stood in a corridor that shouldn't exist, walls made of his memories of the Persephone mixed with ether and architecture. Doors lined the hallway, each one slightly different, and in the distance he could hear Zephyra's laugh echoing from multiple directions at once. The maze read his thoughts, responding to his instincts. When he thought about the center, passages opened. When he doubted, they closed. His natural inclination toward chaos. The same instinct that had kept him alive through a dozen close calls in space became an advantage. Where Zephyra likely approached the maze with strategy and planning, Jake just followed his gut. He took turns that made no logical sense, walked through doorways that opened into impossibilities, climbed stairs that led downward, and somehow, improbably, reached the center first. The maze dissolved, and he found himself back in the festival, surrounded by cheering Etherans who apparently broadcast the whole thing on communal displays. Zephyra materialized beside him, her expression caught between annoyance and genuine admiration. That was the most chaotic navigation I've ever witnessed. You ignored every optimal path. Yeah, well, optimal paths are for people who plan ahead. I'm more of a panic and improvise specialist. Jake's head was spinning, though whether from the maze or the psychoactive beverage or the sheer surreality of his situation, he couldn't tell. You're going to be trouble, Zephyra said, but she was grinning. Good, we could use some trouble. The celebration continued around them, but Lyria drew Jake aside, her expression troubled. The council sent a message. They want to meet with you tomorrow. They've examined your ship's engine, and they say the quantum signature matches readings from the old technology. The ancient network. Jake watched the 3 moons above, their alignment already beginning to shift as the night progressed. So it's real. The connection, the prophecy, all of it. It appears so. Lyria's hand found his, her copper skin warm against his palm. I know this isn't what you wanted. You just wanted to deliver cargo and go home. Yeah, well. Jake squeezed her hand, watching the impossible city celebrate under impossible moons on an impossible world that somehow needed him. When has anything I wanted ever gone according to plan? Around them, Etherans danced and laughed and lived, unaware that tomorrow might bring either salvation or confirmation of their doom. And Jake, who'd never wanted to be important or special or part of anything larger than himself, realized he was going to try anyway. Because what else could he do? The council chamber existed in a building that predated the current city by at least 1,000 years, according to Lyria. Its walls bore inscriptions in a language even the Etherans had partially forgotten, and the ceiling opened to the sky where the sun, that dying sun, cast its orange light across stone that had witnessed generations rise and fall. Jake stood before 7 elders whose ears carried so many ornaments they seemed to weigh their heads down, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. His clothes had settled on a resigned gray color that he felt accurately represented his emotional state. The engine from your vessel, the eldest said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries even if her body didn't show it, contains technology we recognize from our ancestors' records, a quantum bridge, a way to fold space itself. Right, except my quantum bridge is currently in about 40 pieces and smells like burning electronics. Jake shifted his weight, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes watching him from the gallery above. Apparently council meetings were public entertainment. My ship's mechanic back home always said the Helix 7 drive was held together by optimism and prayer. Turns out he was more right than he knew. One of the other elders, a woman whose copper skin had faded to something closer to bronze with age, leaned forward. Your humor is a defense mechanism. We understand. What you may not understand is that your arrival has given us something we haven't had in a very long time. Hope. Yeah, about that hope. Want to maybe diversify your portfolio. Put some stock in actual plans made by people who know what they're doing. Jake caught Lyria's eye from where she stood near the wall. She gave him a small nod of encouragement that didn't help as much as he'd hoped. I'm not a scientist. I'm barely a competent pilot. Yet you navigated the mind maze using pure instinct, Zephyra called from the gallery. Several elders shot her disapproving looks, but she just shrugged. What? It's true. He doesn't think like us. That's valuable. The eldest elder raised a hand for silence. We have studied your vessel extensively over the past 3 days, Jake Morrow. The quantum drive created a microscopic wormhole that connected to a network, a web of ancient technology left by those who came before us. This network spans the galaxy, linking worlds we have lost contact with over millennia. Jake's stomach dropped. Okay, but here's the thing about microscopic wormholes. They're microscopic, small, temporary. Mine collapsed the second I came through. I couldn't recreate it if I wanted to, and I don't want to because it nearly killed me. We don't need you to recreate it, another elder said, gesturing to displays that materialized in the air showing schematics that made Jake's head hurt. We need to activate the network node that lies beneath this city. The ancient technology that's been dormant since our people forgot how to access it. And you think my broken engine is the key to that. Your engine's quantum signature is the key. The specific frequency it generated when it opened the wormhole. The eldest elder stood, moving with surprising grace to a section of wall where inscriptions glowed faintly. Our ancestors built gateways, stable portals that could connect distant worlds, allow for instant travel, and yes. She turned to face him directly, channel energy from young stars to dying ones. The implications hit Jake like a physical force. You want to steal energy from another sun. Not steal, borrow, balance. The network was designed for this purpose, to allow civilizations to survive stellar cycles that would otherwise destroy them. The elder's expression softened. But the activation requires the quantum signature from your drive, and once activated, the network will seal this node permanently. The wormhole that brought you here will be irreversibly closed. There it was, the choice he'd been avoiding thinking about since the festival. Jake looked up at the watching faces, saw Lyria's carefully neutral expression that didn't quite hide her hope, saw Zephyrah's challenging grin, saw dozens of others who'd become familiar over the past few days. So I stay here forever, or you all eventually die when your sun gives out. He laughed, but it came out hollow. Those are some really great options. I'm so glad the universe gave me such a clear choice. We would not force you, the eldest said quietly. You have free will, but we are asking, begging if we must, your life in exchange for our civilization's survival. Jake walked to where the inscriptions glowed, running his hand over stone that had outlasted empires. You know what's funny? 3 days ago, my biggest concern was whether I could afford repairs on a ship I didn't even like that much. I was hauling protein paste to a colony I'd been to 40 times before. Same route, same boring job, same life that wasn't going anywhere. He turned to face them, and something in his chest that had been tight since the crash finally loosened. And then I fell through a hole in space, crashed on an impossible world, met people who are somehow exactly like humans but also completely different, got surrounded by women who laughed at my stupid joke instead of being offended, won a mind maze by being too chaotic to predict, and now apparently I'm the guy who has to decide whether to save a planet. Jake, Lyria started, but he held up a hand. The thing is, back home nobody needed me. I was replaceable, interchangeable. There are 1,000 cargo pilots who could do my job probably better, but here. He looked around the chamber at the ancient technology waiting to be awakened, at the faces watching him with something that looked like faith. Here, apparently I'm the random element you've been missing, the chaos factor. The guy who doesn't know enough to know what's impossible. The eldest elder inclined her head. Is that a yes? It's a yes, but I have conditions. Jake counted on his fingers. 1. Someone teaches me to actually dance in those anti-gravity fields instead of flailing like a dying fish. 2. I want my own quarters in one of those living buildings, and I get to decorate however I want even if it clashes with your aesthetic. 3. Zephyrah owes me a rematch in the mind maze when I've had time to practice. And 4. He looked directly at Lyria. Someone explains to me why your males live separately, because that's weird and I'm going to be living here, so I should probably understand the social structure I'm joining. Lyria's expression transformed, relief and joy mixing with something deeper that Jake was still learning to recognize. Those terms are acceptable. Then let's fire up this ancient network, and save your son before I change my mind, and remember I'm terrified." Jake turned to the elders. "What do I need to do?" The process took hours. Engineers brought components from the Persephone, connecting them to systems that had slept for millennia beneath the city. Jake stood in a chamber that hummed with power, his hands on interfaces that responded to his touch, while Lyria called out frequencies and Zephira monitored energy levels in half the city, apparently crowded into observation galleries to watch. "The quantum signature is stabilizing," Lyria announced, her voice tight with concentration. "The network is recognizing the pattern." Jake felt the moment it happened, a resonance that started in the technology and spread through the stone, through the city, through the planet itself. The ancient inscriptions blazed with light, and above them, visible through the open ceiling, the sky tore open in a way that was completely different from the wormhole that had brought him here. This was controlled, intentional, beautiful. A gateway of pure energy that connected Aethera to somewhere distant, and through it flowed power from a star that could spare it, feeding into their dying sun like a transfusion. The chamber shook, but this was different from the seismic tremors Jake had felt before. This was the vibration of something massive awakening, systems engaging after countless silent years, technology fulfilling the purpose it had been built for. "It's working," someone shouted, and cheers erupted from every gallery. Jake felt the moment the wormhole collapsed, the pathway that could have taken him home sealing itself permanently as the network stabilized. No going back now. This was home, whether he'd planned it or not. The shaking subsided. The light from the gateway settled into a steady glow that would remain, according to the readouts Lyria was frantically interpreting, for centuries. Long enough for the ether and sun to stabilize, for the planet to survive, for these people to continue their impossible civilization among their glowing forests and floating architecture. Jake stumbled back from the interface, exhausted, and found Lyria there to catch him. "Did it work? Tell me it worked and I didn't just break everything worse." "It worked." She was crying, which he'd learned Aetherans did the same way humans did when overwhelmed. "You saved us. You actually saved us." "Yeah, well," Jake managed a weak smile. "Somebody had to. Might as well be the guy who crashed here, making inappropriate comments." Zephira appeared, pulling them both into an embrace that would have crushed ribs if she hadn't been careful. "You beautiful idiot. You stayed." "Didn't have much choice, did I? You broke my ship, made me play mind games, and gave me fruit that tattles on my emotions. I'm clearly stuck with you people." They emerged from the chamber to find the city transformed. The steady flow of energy from the gateway had already begun affecting the atmosphere, the light subtly different, the air itself feeling more alive. People celebrated in the streets, dancing without anti-gravity fields, just pure joy at having a future again. The eldest elder found Jake in the crowd, placed a hand on his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You made a sacrifice few would make. You will be remembered in our histories as the chaos that brought balance. Just tell them I was devastatingly handsome and occasionally funny. That's the legacy I'm shooting for." Jake watched the celebration, feeling Lyria's hand find his, Zephira's presence solid at his other side. "Also maybe mention I had no idea what I was doing. That seems important." Later, standing on a platform overlooking the city as the twin moons rose, and the new gateway light painted everything in shades of hope, Jake reflected on how his life had become something he never could have predicted. No more cargo runs, no more boring routes, no more being replaceable. Instead, he had an impossible world, impossible friends, and an impossible future that stretched ahead with all the chaos and wonder he could handle. "Are you going to be okay?" Lyria asked quietly, "Staying here, never going home." Jake thought about his cramped ship cabin, his non-existent friends, his interchangeable job hauling protein paste. Then he thought about anti-gravity festivals and mind mazes and alien women who laughed at his jokes, and a civilization that had needed exactly the kind of random chaos he specialized in. "Yeah," he said, and meant it. "I think I'm going to be fine." Above them, 3 moons hung in the sky, and below, a city celebrated its salvation. And Jake Morrow, former cargo pilot and current professional chaos agent, smiled at the impossible beauty of it all and felt, for the first time in his life, exactly where he belonged.